Welcome everyone to our latest Winter Warmers event. My name is Kirsty and I'm the Fundraising Coordinator at OneKind, Scotland's largest animal campaigns charity. OneKind lobbies the government to create effective changes for Scotland's animals, to change welfare, legislation and the lives of animals across Scotland for the better. I'll be joined by animal activist and actor Peter Egan today, where I interview him about his love of animals, his work and a little bit more about his personal life in our latest Winter Warmers feature.
Interesting to hear you say that, because you are a marvellous campaigning charity, that you are making the Scottish Parliament aware of the importance of animal welfare. It's something, of course, that this side of the border we're always reminding our Parliament of. And I think certainly in the last 5 years, they have become aware of what a huge vote winner animal welfare / animal rights is, and compassion and kindness, and something that is vital to our very being, and also subsequently to our society. It is a vital engine for humanity, compassion and kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. Great way to start off the interview. Couldn't agree more, Peter. Your passion really shines through when you're speaking, so that's great to hear. It's so kind of you to support us at OneKind by doing this. So first of all, what we all want to know is, have you always had a love for animals, or was this just something that came about later in life?
Well, I had, when I was a child, a long time ago, I was born in 1946, just after the Second World War, and I remember I lived in my grandmother's house. My relatives on my father's side all came over from Ireland in 1936 and settled in North London, and so there was a house full of lunatics, really, of Irish lunatics, and I remember we had 2 dogs during my childhood there, a collie and a chocolate brown Labrador. And I remember feeling rather passionate about them as one would as a child. I mean, it's such an important introduction, I think, to caring and kindness and compassion, to have an animal in your life very, very early on. I think it's also very good for your immune system as well. Building up your antibodies and stuff. But after that, I didn't really have any animals in my life until I was 40. And that was because I felt that I didn't really have enough time to give to animals, because I was very ambitious as a young actor, and I was devoting a serious amount of time to my career. In the 5 years from about age 35 to 40, my wife Myra said to me, "You're not reading our daughter's Christmas lists properly, are you?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean." She said, "Well, on one Christmas she said dog lead. On another Christmas she said dog bed. On another Christmas she said dog food. And now finally she's put on her Christmas list dog. And you've ignored those hints. There's one of my 4 dogs now, and that's Pippa, who's barking at something in the garden. And of course I had missed all of those hints. And then when I was 40, I felt that I had created enough of a platform for myself as an actor that I would have more time and would have more ability to choose, because you are very much a nomad as an actor. You go where the work is, and so it's very, very hard to have a really stable family life. But at 40, I felt that I could control my career to the degree that I felt that was right. So then we got a black Labrador called Crackers. It's the only dog that we've ever bought from a breeder, because as soon as I was introduced to Crackers, who was the most beautiful labby, another dog collapsed in front of the Ballyrambere in West London where we lived. It happened to be a blonde Labrador that we called Custard, and this poor creature was not young, but had been abandoned or had lost his owner, and my wife was walking past the Ballyrambo. We lived quite close to it, and she saw this dog and went to the vet with it. And then, of course, the dog came to our home, and I said, "What are you doing? We've already got one dog. We don't need two." And then the dog started sitting at my feet at the table, looking up at me with his big brown eyes whenever we talked about keeping him. And finally, putting my hand over his eyes, I said, "Okay, we'll keep the dog." So then we had two dogs, and it was just wonderful to be a novice as far as looking after dogs, to see how they interrelated, and to watch them grow, and to see how wonderfully communicative they were. And it sort of grew from there. We then moved to North London. I was near Hampstead Heath. I walked the dogs on the heath. I would meet other owners, meet people who had rescued dogs. I knew nothing at all about rescue. I knew nothing about dog abandonment. I knew nothing about the multitude of charities we have in the UK that are dealing with the huge problems that people, sadly, who are very careless about having an animal. I always hesitate about how to describe. I try to avoid the word ownership, because I don't believe in owning animals. So when I talk about it, I pause whenever I say I've got a dog, because I don't want to call myself an owner. I'm a guardian. So meeting many other, and I don't mean to sound fanciful when I say that, it's just I do believe very, very firmly, I believe in animal welfare, but more importantly, I believe in animal rights. And just as, you know, you can't mention human welfare without mentioning human rights, and it's totally accepted, there seems to be a division between animal welfare and animal rights. People are frightened of animal rights. That's why they like to use the term ownership, which I reject as much as I can, and use the term being a guardian or a friend, or, you know, or a doctor, or whatever. Because I do feel passionately about, I have 3 dogs sleeping on the floor around me here. I do feel passionately about their right to, within the society they live, to have the rights that are right for them, if you see what I mean, the rights to express themselves in the way that they feel is right, and not to be too controlled by me. That became a very long sentence, didn't it, when you asked me about that? I'm sorry about that.
No, that's great. I mean, your passion and love for dogs just it took over there, which is just lovely to hear. You do quite a lot of work with dogs, Peter, don't you?
I do. Yes, I do. First of all, it started. I was asked to be a patron and trustee of right at the very beginning, a dog charity called All Dogs Matter in North London, which was being run by 4 girls from their cars and on their phones. They didn't have a base, and I got to know about them, and we got together. They started having meetings at our house, and so we kind of used our house to a degree as an office for All Dogs Matter, and that then developed remarkably well, because it's so well run by the founder and CEO, a woman called Ira Moss. And through them, I got a greater experience about this whole process of dogs being abandoned, and I wanted to understand the problem rather than just be a benign patron. And so I started to visit the pounds around North London. And I even, because you know they have the ticking clock syndrome, where they keep the dog for a week, and if the dog isn't claimed, and if the dog isn't sent to a shelter, then they are put to sleep. And I found that shocking, and I found it shocking that so many, at this time, this is now 12 or 13 years ago, that so many were put to sleep. I mean, indeed that happens now, because some dogs, for some reason, are deemed to be unrehomable. And so I would go to, if a dog was being put to sleep, I would go and give it a hug. because I wanted that dog not to be alone. I'm getting a bit kind of moved by that, because just 2 days ago I had to do the same thing for our lovely Labrador called Cassie, who had reached the end of her time, and so we had to help her on her way. So it's a very emotional moment, that recollection. But I wanted to understand what it was like for dogs, to what they were experiencing. This may be linked, to a degree to my journey as an actor, because my journey as an actor is to try and experience other humans' emotions. So maybe that informed that process to a degree as well, apart from what I believe is the thing that drives us all, as I mentioned earlier, which is compassion and kindness. And so I did want to experience, I didn't want to just have an intellectual appraisal of that, because if I want to argue something, I want to know entirely what the situation is. And that also, it has led me to the dog meat farms in South Korea and the extreme markets in Indonesia, which is like the market in Wuhan, where this COVID pandemic started. So, I've kind of, through a commitment to animal rights and the rights of animals to live their life on our planet, I've gone to many extremes throughout the world to try and understand the problems that animals encounter, subjected to by we humans. It's devastating, and what shocks me daily is I can't think of a single species on our wonderful planet that humans aren't in one way or another destructive or cruel to. It's quite devastating, and it's also shocking how few people know about it, and when people do know about it, how little they're prepared to do about it. So I have a very broad experience in terms of my understanding about. It's why I believe so fundamentally in animal rights, and I've taken that path because I don't ever want to talk about something that I don't fully understand, if that makes sense. So I've sort of beaten myself up quite a lot to kind of get those experiences. And I don't mean that vicariously, I mean that purely in terms of understanding, Mm-hmm. We are amazing, we are amazing species as humans, but we are also amazingly capable of amazing cruelty. And that's something which I daily am shocked by.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that, humans can be very, very cruel, but it's so reassuring to be surrounded by people like yourself and everyone in the meeting today that are so against this cruelty and want to take action and want to stand up against that. So thank you, Peter, for that inspiring answer to that question. I'm so sorry to hear that your dog passed away. It's so sad when that happens. But, it seems that you've worked all over the world as you try to understand the suffering that animals go through. We were chatting just before the interview started about your work with the European Link Coalition. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yes, well, that's a wonderful campaign started by a man called Malcolm Plant. And it is called the Link, the European Link Coalition. And we're focusing at the moment on the stray dogs in Tunisia. Many of these countries, particularly around Eastern Europe, but also in places like Tunisia, the way they solve the problem of stray dogs is not, which is the only way, I believe, to solve the problem, which is to have a system in place which is spay, neuter, and release, or spay, neuter, and return, so that you are returning dogs to either the villages or the territory that they know. Because dogs, like wolves or foxes, will create and control their own territory. So rather than adopt a compassionate, for want of a better word, policy in dealing with that, what they do is they cruelly kill the dogs. They either shoot them, or they poison them, or they beat them. And of course, this happens on the streets, and young children witness this awful violence. And of course, young children are very receptive to, you know, their surroundings and events that affect them. And so they are witnessing violence, and this violence is then, they are persuaded to accept that this violence is quite normal and quite natural. And what the link has found is that adolescents who experience this kind of aggression then go on to either commit it themselves or experience it in a societal way in their domestic situation. So it becomes an ongoing cycle of violence that gets worse and worse and worse. And also, it destroys the natural empathy and the natural compassion that children have, because children don't want to be cruel. Children don't want to be cruel to animals. They prefer to play with them. And so what the link is doing, and they're working with UNICEF, is bringing attention to this situation, to this societal problem. And at the moment, Tunisia is very, very high on the agenda, because what is happening there is quite appalling. And the Tunisian government really do need to find a compassionate way, a constructive way of dealing with this problem, rather than a destructive way of dealing with this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a way that everyone at home can support that?
Yeah, they can Google the European Link Coalition, and they will get information about it, and they can certainly give their support. It's a campaign that is just developing, and so it needs lots and lots of support. And I think it is the sharing of the information and raising awareness about this, because again, this is something that happens so much in our lives, and we accept it and don't realize that we are being conditioned. And I just think it's wonderful to make people aware of all of the conditioning that happens around us, that is destructive.
Absolutely. I think Mal Plant has just said there as well, Peter. Is that someone that you've worked with on this?
Yes, Mal Plant is the person who started this coalition, and he is very much the prime mover, and he's a brilliant man.
Well, Mal's just said there's also the mysterious human facility to be empathetic. This is the essential attribute which determines those who will be violent to others, whether this be a person or a child. By adopting this new perspective, all violent practices witnessed by children can be ended to protect the animals, to protect the children and the animals.
You protect one, you protect the other. That's something that I support very, very firmly. And I do support Mal Plant's complete commitment to stopping societal violence as derived from the street violence in dealing with stray dogs.
That's great. Thank you for chatting to everyone about that, Peter. It's a really worthwhile cause, and very interesting. We had a webinar for winter warmers from Jilly from the SSPCA earlier, and she was talking about the similar thing, the link between domestic violence and animal cruelty, and it's a fascinating subject. So thank you for bringing that up.
Also, just as a matter of interest, I think in America, the FBI are now, as they have a list of sex offenders, they now have a list of animal offenders, and more often than not, they join up, not just sex offenders, but people who become either serial killers or who are violent in a societal sense. The link starts from being cruel to animals. It's amazing how it develops.
That is so interesting. So, I mean, it's obviously you're involved with quite a few organisations and you do a lot of activism work, Peter. You're also the ambassador for Animals Asia. What does your work look like with them?
Well, Animals Asia is I have to say, my favourite charity on the planet. And the work that they do, as far as I am concerned, really defines the very meaning of animal welfare / animal rights. It's a charity that was founded about 27 years ago by a very inspiring woman called Jill Robinson. It's based in, the charity is based in Hong Kong, but the work they do is in China and Vietnam. They have 3 sanctuaries, one in Chengdu, which is, I think, is in southwestern China, one in Nanning, and one in Vietnam. And they have an MOU with the Vietnamese government that, providing they can get everything right, they will ban bear bile farming in Vietnam by 2022, which is an amazing achievement. But I was asked by Jill Robinson, I think about 12 years ago, to be an ambassador for their dog and cat program. And because when Jill started in China, there were very few animal charities. Now there's nearly a couple of hundred of them, and they all have come from Animals Asia's work and been inspired by Animals Asia's work, which is just phenomenal, I think. So when Jill asked me if I would be an ambassador for the dog and cat program, it was the first time I'd heard of Animals Asia, and then I looked at the great work they're doing for moon bears, and I fell in love with moon bears. I think that bear bile farming is the worst and the cruelest animal welfare problem on the planet. Because I'm sure you know, if you know anything about bear bile farming, bears can live for up to 30 years. And in China and Vietnam, they are kept in crush cages, which is just barely enough for them to move around. And they can live for 30 years in these positions. And the bears, of course, go in the same. Jill came upon this by accident 27 years ago, was so shocked by this situation that she started this amazing charity called Animals Asia. And to date, I think they've rescued something like 600 to 800 bears. There are sadly something in the region of 15,000 to 18,000 bears kept in cages. It's legal in China, kept in these crush cages, and it's just heartbreaking. I went to visit the sanctuary in Chengdu in 2012, and I just fell in love with the place. It was remarkable to be in 125 acres of, they are caged areas, enclosures, you know, they have many enclosures with different groups, not different, all moon bears, but different personality type of bears in each enclosure, and they create a wonderful environment in terms of trying to recreate living in the wild as much as possible, because none of these bears can be returned to the wild, of course. And they all, they have the most fantastic hospital on site with the amazingly committed vets. And of course, all of the bears have to have their gallbladder removed because it's always diseased by the time they've rescued them. And, you know, bears are just the most wonderful, playful, eccentric creatures, and seeing them enjoying themselves, having, I mean, I've seen again some awful photos of these wonderful bears locked in positions that are so horrific, and in these cages, and then you see them, the ones that have been rescued in these enclosures, having fun. I would suggest anyone who is interested to go onto YouTube and Google Animals Asia and just put in bear fun, and you'll see, you know, bear cubs having baths with bubble baths and things like that, and just really having a great time. It's magical, absolutely magical. And then, of course, you can also see how shockingly badly they're treated on these farms. And what is also worse is that bear bile, which does have some remedial value, bear bile can be created synthetically, and it is, of course, much better than the bile that is taken from the bear. And because the bears, as in any kind of, when you start interfering with animals on a mass scale, they have to have so many antibiotics, they have to have so many chemicals pumped into them every day, like they do on, you know, industrialized agricultural farms. So these bears have terrible diseases as a result of having their bile extracted on a daily basis. So I just found it inspiring to walk around this sanctuary and just watch these bears enjoying their life. The atmosphere is serene. The commitment of the team is sensational. And I've sort of left my heart there the first time. I've been back a couple of times since, and I hope to go back again when this pandemic is over. It's a great, great charity. And it does, as I said, define the very meaning of animal welfare / animal rights.
That's excellent. We're familiar with Animals Asia. Myself, I work with the volunteers at OneKind, and when we've been volunteering at vegan festivals and such like in Scotland, there's always an Animals Asia stall, and the team are always lovely. And yeah, the work they're doing with moon bears is just great, Peter. It must have been amazing to have seen that firsthand.
Wow.
Yeah. You mentioned there a link between the sort of intensivity of bears being farmed and agriculture. Obviously that's a problem in the UK as well, not just over in East Asia. You also went vegan a few years ago. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and why you're against intensive farming?
I watched a film called Earthlings, I think it was about 11 or 12 years ago, and which of course is a remarkable film about intensive animal agriculture. And it was such an eye-opener to me. I couldn't believe that for all the years before, I believed the kind of gumph that these corporations put out with the happy cattle in the field, bouncing around the field, can't wait to get to the slaughterhouse to feed us, you know, that, and the happy cow being milked, and all of that PR rubbish that we, you know, I sometimes, I beat myself up quite a lot about having been so stupid all of my life not to actually look into it earlier. But I suppose the time is right for us all in one way or another. I watched this film, and I was so shocked I couldn't speak for 3 hours after watching it. And my wife came into the kitchen where I was watching it, and she said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" She thought something had happened to me because I was just completely zombied. And I said, "I've just watched the most appalling documentary I will ever see in my life, and I'm never going to eat meat again." And I haven't. But what I didn't do then was join up all the dots in terms of other forms of, like fish, like dairy farming, like all of that. I hadn't, so I just progressed my way through eliminating all of the nasties until I became a vegan 7 years ago. And it's, I think, the best decision I ever made in my life. I am absolutely thrilled to be a vegan, to be an ethical vegan, and to follow a plant-based lifestyle. It is the most exciting, imaginative, tasty lifestyle that on the planet. It also is so good for our planet, as we know, if you are vegans as well. It's we will, if 50% of the world became vegan, we would heal the planet in 10 years. And the planet needs healing, as we know, because of intensive animal agriculture. So it is something that I also feel passionate about. I'm passionate about it because also it is completely in line with my beliefs about kindness and compassion. It connects my head with my heart. So what my head is telling me to do and my heart is telling me to do join up on the same path. That makes me very, very happy. And I think also, because, you know, when I decided to be a vegan and told people I was going to follow a vegan lifestyle, lots of people, "Oh, don't do that. Oh God, don't become one of them. You know, you'll start wearing a hair shirt, or you'll never stop talking about it, or you'll wear brown sandals, open sandals with grey socks and look terrible." And, you know, all of those kind of preconceptions about vegans and vegetarians and veganism. And in fact, you know, it's all rubbish. I mean, the most amazing people at all the vegan festivals I go to, I meet the most fabulous people, and I meet so many young entrepreneurs who are so exciting, producing such good stuff, not only food, but also shoes and, you know, everything you need in life. So it's, you know, it's just a fantastic way to live, and it's constructive. And I do firmly believe it will save our planet.
That's a very inspiring message. Thank you, Peter. You mentioned fish farming then before, and you know that's something that we work really closely with at OneKind. We've had a campaign to stop the salmon farm expansion for a few years now. You know, the industry is hoping to double its output in a few years, and that's something that we absolutely want to stop. We feel like it's one of the worst animal welfare crises ongoing in Scotland at the moment, with what salmon have to endure. And I think you and I were speaking earlier on about welfare issues in Scotland, and you mentioned salmon farming and how abhorrent that is. So thank you for your support on that as well. Are there any other issues in Scotland that you feel the public need to?
Yeah, well, I think that, as we also touched on, driven grouse shooting is one. I mean, well, something is a monoculture. It dominates 20% of the land in Scotland. It's so destructive. It's just destroying the ecosystem on 20% of Scotland, which is shocking in itself. And it's totally unnecessary. It's to support a sport, or a so-called sport, a pastime for psychopaths, in my opinion. But if I can just talk about, go back to the fish element of it, there's a wonderful book by Philip Limbury, who is the CEO of Compassion in World Farming. It's called Farmageddon, and there's a wonderful, it's a great book in terms of animal agriculture, intensive farming across the board. But there was a wonderful chapter in it about intensive fish farming up in the lakes of Scotland, and how it is destroying the aquaculture of Scotland, and also the amount of seals that are aggressively shot because of it. And so, I mean, it's a major problem. And also the lice and stuff like that, I mean, that exist on the fish, and all the kind of things they have to go through the fish in order to be, you know, good to eat. I mean, it's just a disgusting business, and again, totally unnecessary. And like any intensive, aggressive food production system, it destroys everything around it, and in order to produce a clean bit of fish flesh or animal flesh, and you don't have to go through all that. You can get wonderful plant-based stuff, which without destroying the planet. So I think that's a major problem. I think these next 10 years, all of these things have got to be aggressively dealt with, because, you know, what is so stupid about we humans is that I think we are the only species on the planet that collude with our own destruction. And all of these intensive, corporate-run, aggressive animal agricultural imperatives are destroying our planet and us.
Yeah. Stark warning, the effect that we're having on the planet, as you said earlier, Peter. You know, there's just no species that humans seem to have not affected in some way or another. But, you know, there is hope, and I think that people like yourself and everyone here, as I mentioned earlier, it's so great that, you know, we can all get involved with these amazing charities like Animals Asia, and of course I'm biased, but I'll say OneKind, that are doing everything they can to, you know, stop this from happening. And the support
I have to say, inspiring people like you, Kirsty, as well. You are so young, and you are the future. So commend you in return.
Thank you. We'll let that go to my head. But do you have any sort of messages for everyone watching at home today about what they can do to help the planet, to help animals, whether that be on a local level or an international level? I'm sure everyone would really appreciate your advice on that.
Well, I think that everyone can do something. Someone asked me this some years ago. I said, you can do one thing daily for the planet or for animals or for humans. You can do it and choose to do it daily, whether it be, I have decided I'm not going to eat animals. It's a big decision to make, but it's not as hard as it seems. So if you made a choice to follow a plant-based lifestyle, you are going to have an enormous impact on the planet. I think I read somewhere that one person giving up eating meat saves the lives of about 200 animals a year. You know, that's a phenomenal kind of bargain. I think that people should not look away from the problems that we are creating, and should, if you have a Twitter account or if you're on social media, support the charities that are doing the kind of work that you agree with, share their message. If you can't donate, and you know, there are many people, of course, who can't at any time, and those people sometimes say, well, I have nothing to give. And I say, you have a voice to give, and your voice, just start a Twitter account. You may only have 100 or 10, you may, however many followers you have, share a message, discuss things with people. Don't look away. Always look towards the problem and see if you care about it, you can contribute something to help solve the problem. Also, lobby your MP. Tell your MP how you feel about certain things. There are so many things you can action, and don't ever be put off by the fact that you think your voice is too small or irrelevant or no one is listening to you. Because someone always is listening to you, and particularly with social media and the way we communicate nowadays. And be brave and don't be put off.
That's excellent advice, Peter. Thank you so much. Very inspiring and uplifting. It sort of echoes something that we say at OneKind quite a lot when people ask us what we do, and we always say that, well, we give a voice to the voiceless. And I think that you do that, and every animal lover on this call does that, and we have the power to do that, as you say, through platforms like social media now, more than ever, more than our predecessors ever did. We've got that sort of connectivity where we've got a platform to talk about these things. So it's really good things to think about and a great thing to take away there. But, you know, we can tell that you're such an activist and you love all of this. And I have to say, I had a little Google on Wikipedia, a little bit about you and what you're known like on set. And I read somewhere that you refuse to eat meat on the set for Downton Abbey. Yeah. Are you known on set as being a bit of an animal activist? Like, do you like to rally up support for those things?
Well, I mean, it's that's a bit of animal activism support there coming through. That's Pippa, Boo, and Titus. Titus is my rescue from Sarajevo, suffering strays, Sarajevo, which I'm also a trustee for. What did you ask me? That's now the barking has interrupted my train of thought, and I forgot what you asked me. What did you say?
No problem. I was asking if you're known as being a bit of an activist.
Oh, yes, sorry. Well, I am, because you know, when I sign a contract for a job, and I am provided food on filming days by a location caterer. So it's in my contract that I'm a vegan, and that there has to be a vegan option, but I won't touch any animal product on set. And that's completely accepted. And also, what is wonderful is that many actors now are vegan. And what is inspiring, and I often photograph it and tweet it, is when I'm on location and you're queuing by the location caterer truck, you'll see on the menu vegan option, and that's only happened in the last 5 years. And I just think that's very inspiring and fantastic. And what I love is that many of the cast and crew who try the vegan option come up to me and say, "Great, I'm glad I had that. I'm gonna have it again." So, you know, small steps like that are very important. People do moan about vegans a lot, don't they? Say, how do you know a vegan is a vegan? Because they never stop talking about it. And I suppose that would be true as far as I'm concerned. I don't beat people around the head, but when people say, "Oh, you're a vegan, you never stop talking about it," I say, "Did you watch television last night?" And they say, I said, "You will see when you're watching television that in every interval, you'll see at least 5 things where meat is being offered to the viewer." So you are conditioned to accepting meat as your way of life. You don't need to talk about it because it's the status quo. Whereas something as exciting and creative as veganism is trying to alter the status quo. So we have to talk about it because it's so important. And I don't mind irritating you about it because I believe 100% in it.
That's great, Peter. It's lovely to hear how passionate you are about that. On that subject, personally, I'm vegan as well. I need to ask, what are you eating for Christmas dinner this year?
I haven't decided yet, but I mean, people say that. I say, well, there's only one thing I'm not eating, and that's an animal product. Because, everyone on the planet is 80% vegan anyway. Because, most of the stuff around that piece of turkey or whatever it is, they're vegetables. So I'll certainly have a plate full of my favorite vegetables roasted. But I'm a great fan also of sort of Pan-Asian vegan food. So I'll have something with an interesting Pan-Asian sauce of some kind. But I tend to try and make up my mind on the day what I want to eat. And you can do that when you're dealing with fresh produce anyway. So I haven't quite decided. I mean, I'll probably have a few of those mac and cheese little balls that you can buy, little something with a beer. But I haven't decided yet. But I know it'll be delicious because all the food I eat now is delicious. And I also have a problem, though I may say. I don't want to sound curmudgeonly and a bit screwedish, but I believe in celebrating every day. So I don't need Christmas to create a celebratory thing as far as I'm concerned. I just find Christmas is a bit of a commercial enterprise now. It's something great for kids and stuff like that. And I know one can't not be asked these kind of questions, but I believe in celebrating life. I believe in celebrating being generous on a daily basis and being kind on a daily basis. And that's my good cheer 52 weeks of the year, basically.
Well, that's lovely to hear. And, going back to what you were saying about how you've traveled the world trying to understand the suffering that animals go through, no matter where they are, whether it's in East Asia or here in Scotland, you've really put yourself in their shoes to try and understand these things. And you still celebrate every day, which is a fantastic sort of mindset for everyone to take away today. So thank you so much, Peter, for your time today. It's been a lovely, lovely interview. It's been a pleasure listening to all of your answers and speaking to you today. We've had a few comments from everyone in the chat function here. Caroline echoes my words. She says, what an inspiring interview. And see, Rossi's just saying people moan about vegans mainly because it makes them feel guilty on some level. And Lauren's also just said, I had a whale of a time in Tesco yesterday. So many vegan options.
Fantastic. The Wicked range in Tesco is magnificent. And they have some fantastic puddings, which we've got to be careful of. I'll have one of those on Christmas Day, I have to say. Also, if we're wrapping up, let me also say I've always enjoyed so much my trips to Scotland. I played Edinburgh a huge lot. At the theatres in Edinburgh, I've played a lot over the years. They're great theatres. People are great in Scotland. I filmed in Glasgow and I filmed up in the Trossachs and stuff like that. Great. I mean, it's. I've always had a wonderful time in Scotland, and I think the Scottish tribe are fantastic.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I don't think we've had any further questions in the chat. People have just been saying how fantastic it's been and how much they've enjoyed it, Peter. But I've got one question for you then, one last one while you're talking about Scotland. Where's your favourite place in Scotland?
I filmed is it Loch Finn or Loch Fyne? How do you pronounce that? Is it Loch Fyne? Loch Fyne. I filmed up in Loch Fyne when I was doing Downton Abbey. And I loved that. I loved the area there. It was beautiful. But I think I love the place that stayed with me most profoundly are the Trossachs. It was just wonderful to be up there. I think it was Glenfinlas or something like that. And I just thought it was beautiful and magical, and it looked stunning. It's a great tourist spot. Absolutely wonderful.
Oh,
that would be my favorite. Right, that in terms of being rural, in terms of being in a city, I love Glasgow, and I also absolutely adore Edinburgh.
Well, next time you're in Edinburgh, Peter, you need to come to the OneKind office, and when it's safe to do so again, you're most welcome there. So thank you so much for today. That's fantastic. And thank you so much to everyone that came along. As everyone's been saying in the chat, what a wonderful interview it's been, and you're such an inspiring person, Peter. So thank you so much for speaking to us today.